Well, thanks, and Crystal, thank you. That was beautiful. My name is Emily Harrows. I work at the Center for Indigenous Health. I am not Indigenous, and I will just say that I was very nervous about coming. Part of it is because I hate being in the spotlight, and I'll blush on the drop of a hat, as some of my colleagues back there know. But also, I think something that Dr. Redbirds brought up earlier about sort of the fear in this. So I have 3 young girls, and I think a lot about climate change and read the news, and I think a lot about that, and I don't know how to explain it to them. I don't know how to talk to them about it, and I feel scared. And I think what happened today was sort of this light bulb moment of like coming from a place of love being such a powerful way to talk to them about it and to sort of conceptualize this, and that I realize as their mother that these first sort of thoughts of theirs is being shaped by their family. So I felt very comfortable talking about sort of this family approaches, but I was nervous about the planetary health parts, and it's sort of now coming together, and I really appreciate that all and learning today. So I'm going to talk a little bit, Crystal mentioned it, about precision home visiting, and our thinking on this has evolved very dramatically. Thanks to my dear colleague, Lisa Martin, who couldn't join us today. Crystal's been a part of this sort of evolution in thinking, many others have as well. So in public health, we hear a lot about populations. In medicine, we hear a lot about people. We think about precision medicine. So that's like buzzwords. We also hear about precision public health. And some of those things make you think of like almost like narrowing in. And I think as we've gone through this journey over the past 4 or 5 years, it's really about sort of expanding our vision of how we develop and think about interventions. So this is really focused on interventions. So I don't need to tell this to the room, and I guess this is where those lessons and teachings today were so valuable for me. But families are really the foundation of health in many Indigenous communities and many communities around the world, right? Those are the earliest learnings, the earliest teachings kids learn, and sort of that shapes their trajectory through life. But as we also all know, families are really vastly different and look different. I wish I had more expansive families here, but there's only so much room on slides because there's endless combinations here, and it's really a beautiful thing. And just like biodiversity, right, these differences hold incredible value, right? In nature, these differences, diverse ecosystems provide stability and sustainability. There's food security, right? These diverse ecosystems build food and security through that. There's medicines, there's trees and shrubs that provide protection and culture. And so these differences are really something to be honored and cherished. And as we know with biodiversity, this is the very fabric of our survival and thriving, right? We need everything in order to survive and thrive. And so thinking about that, when I think about interventions, is sort of the key concept here. Because too often the interventions we do in public health and health in general are these one-size-fits-all approaches. So I keep thinking of that square peg and that round hole. You know, you take a family that needs certain things and you're just like, here's your intervention, do it. You know, even though that doesn't fit their needs, it's not necessarily about them. And in all our statistical models, when we evaluate interventions, we evaluate them on the average effects. But that means, in essence, that some people do really well and some people don't benefit at all, and some people might even be harmed by it. And so when we think about the average or what is one-size-fits-all approach, we're often doing a disservice to people. Slide. So, and it's not only been shown sort of to sort of conceptually be a problem, but it's actually been shown in the literature to impact recruitment into interventions, engagement in interventions, retention in interventions. So if we test these interventions and we want people to participate, they end up dropping out because it doesn't fit their needs. It's not meant for them. And it really makes it hard for our quote-unquote evidence-based practices to address diverse and emergent needs. You sort of test something in a very clinical trial and you roll it out and you can't really respond in that way. So over the last, I can't remember how long we've been doing this, 5 or so years, let's say, we've been really thinking about how we can take family spirit to the program that Crystal sort of talked about and really recreate it in a way that's more conceptualized, more tailored. So as you heard from Crystal, family spirit is quite comprehensive. You saw that list of content. You know, it includes 63 potential lessons that can be delivered prenatally through 3 years. the child's third birthday. Go to the next slide. But as we saw in that, and as we think about different interventions, you know, we can think of how family spirit actually could be made up of lots of different parts, right? So if you take and Allison, thank you for this analogy way back, but the fruit basket, right? There's lots of different fruits, there's different vegetables in any fruit basket. And just like an intervention, it could have lots of different components in that basket. And every family or community might want a different thing, right? They might want different fruit or vegetables, to use that same analogy. And so as we think about family spirit, we think about how do we start to group together the content, the curriculums, the teachings into these components, these groups, these fruits or vegetables. And then how do we use that to sort of offer a tailored program to families? Go to the next slide. So again, you can view it one more way, and we love Legos right now. Family spirit can also be thought of as these broken into pieces. So these components, these fruits or vegetable groups, can be broken into pieces that then can be fit together. So you have the grapes as a red Lego, the apple a green Lego. All of those things can then be built individually to make structures for different families. And really, that means the sum is greater than the whole, right? So like the sum of this is actually really powerful because now it's something that's unique to each family and approach. So we've been doing a lot of work to think about how do we break up family spirit? How do we think about it differently so that we can really tailor it to meet different needs? And I saw a mention of equity and justice. I had to use a young childhood approach to this here. So persistent approaches are really tied to health equity. When we do more tailored and precise approaches for families, we ultimately may make a more equitable and just world. This is a famous graphic showing these terms. So you have inequity up here where one boy gets an apple, one does not, because the tree is leaning towards that other boy. You have equality where they both have the same height ladders, despite necessarily needing different heights. You have equity where the ladders are actually shifted, and then justice where you actually reconfigure the whole tree to make it more just. And so for this, you know, you can think of by tailoring our interventions, we're rebuilding them to address these diverse needs. So we're rebuilding the ladders, and then we're working to really shift the whole intervention, the whole program to be more just. So this precision approach not only lets us tailor, but also lets us build more Lego pieces for different needs. So as Crystal mentioned, we have lots of different work in this area, and I'm just going to highlight a little bit of this. So we have a family spirit nurture, which is a Lego piece in our family spirit curriculum that can be fit in to address prevent childhood obesity, and it's called Family Spirit Nurture, and that's been tested rigorously through through a study, and now is being expanded nationwide through the Family Spirit Network. Colleagues of mine, including Lisa Martin and Leon Nelson, who works out of our Shiprock office, are working on, and myself are working on a mental health module really focused on mental health and well-being called Family Spirit Strengths that can be fit into this home visiting aspect for families that might need it. As I mentioned, Lisa Martin, a colleague, has spent over a year of really deep cultural engagement to build the Family Spirit Thrive curriculum, which is focused on 3 to 5-year-olds and school readiness. And then finally, my colleague and friend, Dr. Joshua Allison Burbank, is working on languages medicine, which he'll tell you a lot more about going forward. And our work in thinking on precision approaches is also expanded quite a bit. So as I mentioned, we're sort of rethinking this idea that it's not a narrowing, but really an expansion. So as Family Spirit is growing through our LEGO project with our international partners, we've been really thinking about how precision approaches to intervention development and delivery can be thought of as an orientation that may be combined with community-based participatory research or other types of participatory research approaches allows communities to leverage all or certain components of the family spirit and modify those to fit the needs of families they serve. So instead of delivering all 63 curriculums or things like that, they may take certain curriculums like a play-based curriculum, set of lessons and really tailor that. And this we really hope is something we're working through with these partners to really think about how they can use this in different ways. And again, I bring up Lisa Martin, I hope she's watching. Lisa Martin also wrote this beautiful piece, really about sort of where the title of the talk came from, which is Respecting Diverse Journeys on Many Roads. And it's really about sort of First Peoples of North America and many others and how they can guide us in the path towards precision home visiting and really towards this idea of sort of tailored intervention approaches. And in that paper, she quotes Mr. Eddie Van Zenvenai, who's a tribal elder of the Lakota Ray Band, and who passed away recently. But he states, and he has a teaching in one of his books on, I've heard my grandfather say that there are many roads to the high place. We need to support each other by respecting the many roads of all tribes. The teaching of one tribe will shed light on those of another. And so with that, I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm grateful to be here again.
Hey everyone, Shade Joshua Allison Burbank Kinishka, Logan Dishlik is Ani Bashim, 200 Shake is Ani Dishla, Abut on, and then Dok is Ani Steam Dishlik. It's a pleasure to be here. It's also a pleasure to be able to highlight my research as an assistant scientist at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. It's great to be here. I'm a member of the Diné Nation, born and raised. I have also had the privilege, the honor to be able to fish, hunt, and grow and farm on the Acoma Pueblo, where my dad is from. And so I'm joining you from unceded, I'm here, but joining you from unceded Tewa lands. I have, again, the pleasure of being able to work close to my community at our Southwest hub in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And next slide, please. I'm here to talk more about my study called Language is Medicine and how all this comes together. I'm a parent. I'm a speech language pathologist. I work mostly with infants and toddlers, so it's a little weird to be in a room full of adults staring at me. And so my passion is working with littles, and this is me in action. This is my circle time, and I spend a lot of time in Head Starts, early Head Start programs, various preschool programs, and I learned a lot of what it's like to run a classroom, to run circle time, and how to really engage the neural development in young children. But it wasn't until I returned home that I realized that I had this knowledge, this Western training, but I needed to braid it with this indigenous knowledge of child development, child rearing, but also to reflect on my own experiences, not just as a speech language pathologist and as a researcher, but most importantly, as a parent and as a farmer. So this is where it all comes together in Planetary Health piece, I feel, is a lot of what advises my work and what has informed my project called Language is Medicine has been this braiding of Western and indigenous ways of knowing and bringing it back to communities. So where we truly decolonize and remove and pull our children out of these spaces that have been Western and sterile in many ways and return them back to spaces that are meaningful, that are intergenerational and allow for individual healing, community healing, as well as earth healing as well. So this is me at Tuhalan Community School running my circle time, and this is me and how I wish I could be every day. Next slide, please. So I'm here to talk to you about my work and really how this, my passion, what brought me back to academia was time in the government. I worked for the Indian Health Service before returning back to academia as a speech language pathologist, and I was running a clinic. I was seeing children from birth all the way through geriatrics. And I realized that my work that I was doing was meaningful, it was impactful, I was using my degree, but I was seeing individuals for such a short amount of time. And I was continuing to be part of that tertiary prevention approach and sticking band-aids on larger issues and not really making an impact. And so I dedicated a lot of my work early on to trying to build up the pediatric speech language pathology and neurodevelopmental supports at Northern Navajo Medical Center in Shiprock, New Mexico. And I realized that there's more I could be doing not only clinically, but also research. And mostly it was because I was seeing such a high incidence of developmental delay in infants and toddlers, and then we see the long-term effects of untreated developmental delay. So now a lot of my work focuses on addressing these high numbers, these high rates, and trying to focus on using the infrastructure that already exists in tribal communities to meet the needs of high rates of developmental delay. Next slide. So yeah, I'm really trying to show why it's important for early investment and trying to intervene early. not just because I prefer littles, but because there's a lot of things we can do and a lot of things we can avoid if we work to address preventable developmental delay and try to remediate the effects of developmental disabilities like global developmental delay, autism spectrum disorder, and the various neurodevelopmental disabilities that we see across Indian country. And I truly believe that if we could prevent or we can remediate and buffer some of these effects, that we could help to prevent long-term chronic health disease, various behavioral differences, and other types of things that get in the way of high quality of life. And so my goal is to really draw attention to evidence-informed, evidence-based, and culturally tailored neurodevelopmental supports delivered through tribal home visiting using this precision approach. Next slide, please. So how does this all come together? Right, I mentioned I was a farmer, and I mentioned I'm a member of Navajo Nation, and I had these aha moments. And if you've taken my classes before at Hopkins or an institute, you hear me reference aha moments. I have these all the time. I had this on the way walking down from my hotel with just these aha moments. I think, oh, that makes complete sense now. But I've had a lot of these more so in the cornfield and as parenting myself, these aha moments where I realized that, well, that there's a reason why grandma or grandpa or mom told me these things, of don't do that, and you do this, and this is why we celebrate these things. I also had these aha moments too of remembering these connections of why did I respond to my child this way, or why did I have this outburst? What happened there when I was raising my young children? Or this year, faced with climate change, I have a 3-acre farm in the North Valley of New Mexico, and we've experienced high heat, record heat. We didn't always have consistent water on the river, and we had high winds. So I think about this relationship. Again, our ancestral traditional teachings as Diné farmers are to look to the corn as a mirror of how we're living or how we're being as a world, but also as a farmer. But this year was tough. This year was tough. And I think about how this reflects on my experiences as a father and as a researcher, and the lessons learned. And I lost a good chunk of my produce, what my family depends on due to climate change. And I think about those teachings there, what that means when we're trying to apply these traditional teachings of, let's say, the Diné cornstalk philosophy that helps us to understand the neural development of young Native children. When that corn falls down, what does that mean? When those corn don't grow, what does that mean? And when there's all these outside forces, what does that mean that's coming down on these corn, the growth of our children? I had this aha moment of the children all are corn, and children feed us and nourish us too, so they're all connected in some way. And this year I had this experience out in the cornfield where I heard the corn talking, heard the corn moving and swaying, and I heard teachings about how the corn comes to life when that monsoon rain is coming or when that first rain happens. And I get chills every time I tell this because it happened for me when I experienced that. The corn, no breeze, no wind, but the corn danced, and they were happy, they were celebrating. It just brought that same amount of joy that I see when my children talk. They had their first laugh, when they had their first successful experience as a basketball player, or giving their first public speech. And I think about these moments as well. And I bring these to my home visits and the work that I do with tribal home visitors as well. And I share this picture here because it's real meaningful to me, because I get to share this with my community now. And we get to really decolonize the way we're providing parent training, parent coaching, and to take stuff like family spirit, language as medicine, and deliver it in this space where the people are, in cultural and home routines like this. And then also to be a PI, to be the researcher, to be able to jump right in, to know what they're doing, and to make these connections for them in real time has been pretty amazing. This is my job. I get to farm and I get to play with kids all day. Next slide. So my focus is really taking a big step back from not just addressing developmental delay. I'm a trained speech language pathologist. I've diagnosed and I've treated children with autism spectrum disorder. I spend a lot of time in neurodevelopmental clinics working along developmental pediatricians. So I know all these interventions: enhanced mindful teaching, early start Denver model, applied behavior analysis. I know those things, but my approach has been like, how can I pull those key pieces of all those interventions? How can I really provide this more universal support that pulls all this evidence and deliver it in a way that's going to be meaningful to Native families? And so this concept I'm borrowing from my nursing colleagues, language and nutrition, really comes from this beautiful experience of stepping out of clinic and going into that sacred space of families, the home, the environment, where these cultural and home routines are happening, and to really think more, not just about trying to address deficits, but trying to foster and build up that nutrition, that healthy space, those healthy routines that exist in families. So language nutrition has really been my approach. So the work that I do is aimed at trying to increase language nutrition in households. So trying to increase not just talking to your child, but trying to increase reciprocity, trying to increase responsiveness as well. And so when I share pictures like this, these snapshots into my own home, my own experiences that I have, I do those intentionally. And these aha moments I've had, I hope you have these too. Because it's in spaces like this that I realize that it's not at playgroups, it's not during reading Dr. Seuss to young children or taking children to these fancy spaces. It's really in these natural home routines where we see the most growth, the most connection between parents and young children. But that's really what I aim to do with sharing a lot of these pictures. Next slide. So this concept of language nutrition describes language exposure that is rich in quality and quantity and delivered in the context of social interactions as crucial for a child's development. This includes words, songs, stories, sounds, gestures, body language, and conversation. This is the white man's version. My version includes ceremony, includes songs, it includes farming, includes all these traditional routines that are very much language rich, already happening. And so I show this picture of my young little one here to highlight how important it is, again, to braid these two different ways of knowing and delivering intervention to really make an impact in Native communities. Next slide, please. But the challenge we have, though, when we're trying to use this precision approach, we know the numbers of young children with developmental delays are significant, they're high. But how do we work with communities to have that collaborative approach? When it's something complex, like explaining what neurodevelopment, autism, developmental delay is to mostly older generation parent and caregivers. And so this is where I've had to really use what I know about community-based participatory research to really think about how to blend these two ways of knowing and believing, help our elders and caregivers to really understand the significance of language nutrition, the significance of having high rates of developmental delay in Native communities, and to really think about how to tailor interventions to a particular community. So it's been a real pleasure again to work with linguists, community members, early interventionists, parents as well, and farmers, to be able to think about how do we take stuff like family spirit, enhanced smiling teaching, and it takes two to talk, these interventions that we commonly use in birth to 3 services. How do we deliver it to Native families in a way that's culturally meaningful? Next slide. So the work that I'm doing now, and I'm going to just give a snapshot of the pilot project I'm doing now. It really aims at tailoring this intervention that's going to be delivered through tribal home visitors. And I'm primarily interested in toddlers between 9 to 24 months of age. And again, my goal is to identify developmental delay as early as possible and to deliver interventions that I would do as a speech language pathologist, but by training community health workers, tribal home visitors to deliver that, and kind of using the classic pre and post intervention approach to measure the effects of this study. Next slide. So the significance of my work and what we're doing in Family Spirit is really building on what we know works across the world. The use of community members who know the language, who know the routines, and are able to deliver this work at high fidelity, with high reliability, being able to tailor it and adjust based on the needs and the changes of their community as well. So I feel like this has been this is that secret sauce. And I think my next slide shows just that, the significance of these Indigenous family health coaches that we use in home visiting, that they really are that secret sauce, that secret ingredient, and getting these evidence-based interventions tailored and delivered in this precision, through this precision model. Next slide. So again, going back to my study here, I really aim to take, again, what I would be doing as a speech language pathologist with one-on-one with young infants and toddlers, but delivering and taking these approaches, these strategies, and delivering them in ways that are going to be meaningful to parents, that have never heard these terms, or either they're going through their own healing experiences, or they're going through their own trauma responses to the way that they were parented or the way they were raised. And so the work that I've been doing has not only focused on trying to address developmental delay in these toddlers, but aimed at increasing parent responsiveness through self-exploration of what it means to be a parent, what it means to provide language nutrition, and also what it means to really build and focus on cultural identity through increasing native language use. So in the last few seconds that I have, my goal is to go over some of the work that I'm doing. We can skip this one here. So what I really aimed at doing is try to use cultural and home routines as that context or that focus in the way we're delivering intervention. So what my team does is we work with our families, our community members to identify common routines that are significant to Navajo families. So not just reading to your child, not just bath time, doing the dishes, these common household routines that we see, but expanding to think more about what actually is happening in Navajo households across time and across the year. Things like chopping and hauling wood, things like going to the trading post to get food, going to the laundromat every Saturday morning. And so the more that we are able to identify these things, we're able to really make connections to families, and we're also able to really help families to show that what they're already doing is significant, powerful, and this is the perfect place to be able to deliver these interventions. And it's been fun to be able to visit powwows, to visit community events. Later this week, I'm going to a child find event as well. We'll be in the community, and we'll be talking to families. We'll also be delivering materials and items to help them better understand what early development is, what hearing loss is, and how that can impact that child's neurodevelopmental trajectory. Next slide. So this is just an overview of the work that I'm doing with my supplement to the Family Spirit Core. My goal is to go in, provide high intensity intervention, and then get out as soon as I can. So what I'm doing is delivering all these lessons within 4 to 5 weeks of through weekly visits, getting focused on teaching parents about what language nutrition is, building more and teaching strategies like those language facilitation strategies that I previously showed, and then also making the connections to where these activities can be delivered, either through shared book reading, through pretend play, but most importantly, by increasing native language use, by embedding these routines and these strategies into these cultural and home routines that we identified with families. Next slide, please. So this is a visual that we use, and I feel like this is our most powerful tool that we use with our families here. This is our routine mapping assessment activity that we do with families. So we talk to parents about what it means to be Diné, what it means to live in harmony and balance, and what it means to live within our sacred mountains, our sacred spaces. So we establish that connection, we establish kinship, we establish trust. Then we talk about what families are doing that's important to them. If families have trouble coming up with routines, we talk to them about what's significant to us, what we've done, what's important to us. But we also encourage families to think about other types of activities that they're doing that is significant, where teaching is happening. And very often, we're having to talk to families about and define and provide models of where learning can actually happen outdoors, at ceremonies, at driving to the grocery store. And what we've learned is that many of our Navajo families have been very much focused on these Western ways of what we're supposed to be doing with their young children, reading or playing or doing very structured activities with young children. So what my goal is to do with my team and with my community advisory board members is to shift the way we think about pretend play, how we think about reading and literacy, and really encourage a lot of this learning to happen in more of these naturalistic, common social and home routines. Next thing. So in closing, it's been a real pleasure again to be able to come into these communities and to work with my own people. The most significant part has been to heal with the families that I'm working with, and to really think about this as a child rearing and responding to the needs of young children with developmental delay as a community responsibility. And so if any of my community partners, CAB members, or my team members are watching, this is for you. And I look forward to giving back to playing with infants and toddlers. So again, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. We have time for questions. Any questions? Yeah.
So I immediately texted our Head Start Early Child Development Program to say, are we using Family Spirit? The answer was like, no. So I don't know, we're in California. I don't know if that was clear, but I'm wondering what kind of funding, do you have like funding sponsorships for the families that you work with? You know, do you do those sorts of incentives or, you know, something to help families participate in this? Or are they just participating because of their will or they're a part of the program? That's my first question. And the second question is, California has, you know, their insurance program has revamped itself. And there's something called CalAIM. They just, I think, identified their second cohort, but another one will be coming. And that's where they take families who are receiving state insurance services, Medi-Cal partnership, and approach healthcare from a holistic perspective of actually kind of surrounding the person, which is what I like what you do with going into the home and surrounding them. Are you guys looking at doing a partnership with any one of the Indian health consortiums or the early childhood Head Start programs to maybe make this idea even bigger and better? It's amazing. I thought it was amazing.
Thank you. Those are really great questions. So the first one about the incentivizing, you know, families, we often will, so when people are using the family spirit model, the agency will determine how they will work with the families. So determine the enrollment to the types of to defining graduation, successful completion, that kind of thing. And so when families are participating, there are going to be different time points where home visitors will often give quote unquote incentive to the family that actually really helps the families to practice what they just learned. And so, you know, we have programs that might give out, for example, you know, swaddling material for the babies, or they might, you know, we have programs that we're actually giving out car seats. We have families who were making, you know, blankets and cradle boards and, you know, just things like that. And so those are, a big practice has been to get families to receive items that will help them to practice the lesson that they just learned. But there's also programs who also want to provide other incentives just to support the families throughout. And so that might be gift cards, that might be diapers. So there's just, you know, and all of that's going to be determined by the folks that are there. What we do hope in terms of just getting more families to participate in the program is we have a lot of interest from communities throughout the nation. But for them to actually start a program, you know, we hope that we're able to help them to identify the different sources, resources to be able to start a program. And then we also try to find funding so that we're sponsoring their training and, you know, their startup as to be a Family Spirit affiliate. And so to the second question about, you know, partnering with other agencies, it's a good one. It's something that we've been always interested in doing for a very long time. And Head Start, because I used to be a Head Start teacher. I always felt like that was such a really perfect space, especially when you have a curriculum that is you know, that has a lot of Indigenous strengths, you know, and so I hope that is something that we will, you know, we definitely want to continue to keep that door open to have those conversations. And it would be amazing, early Head Start had shut down. There was so many programs, if not all, on Navajo Nation had shut down many years ago. And, but there was also a lot of systemic barriers for them to actually implement, what was the policy for early childhood at that time. But we found a lot of value in what we've done using paraprofessionals. But for early Head Start, they had to be accredited, teachers. But we have people from our communities who've been teachers for a long time. So it was something that kind of worked against a lot of our communities. And I hope that at some point will be something that we can continue to explore again. I'm not sure what the practices are right now in early Head Start or Head Start.
The other thing I'll just mention is many of the affiliates are supported through MCV and tribal MCV funding, and then also FFPSA, which is Family First Prevention Services Act. And part of that has been that Family Spirit had done all these rigorous studies, so they're on these lists now of approved programs. So if a tribe wanted to has that funding or get access to that funding, they can then choose which program they might want to implement using that funding from these big lists. So in MCV, there's 21, maybe 22 evidence-based home visiting programs. Family Spirit's one of them, and that's often how programs are funded. And then through the Family First Prevention Services Act, which could be for keeping families together. That can also be accessed to sort of implement these programs. And I do wonder if Cal Aid has a similar kind of clearinghouse of like, what are the programs that are going to be offering these families? And if they don't, that might be something, or we could look into it. We do have team members who are located in California and a number of affiliates there as well. So we can definitely write you more information, I think.
Yeah, CalAIM is just, it's the Medi-Cal side of the state programs. And so it's a new program that the state is throwing millions of dollars at to look at outcomes beyond the medical center.
Yeah.
So what they're hoping is that there will be these caregivers that aren't really caregivers, but they're like what I'll call holistic health coaches, because they want to know, do you not have gas to go to the doctor? Well, let's fix that. Do you need help in shopping and finding out what's nutritious and what you can eat as a diabetic? Let's help you do that. Do you need help filling out paperwork for these other programs like housing assistance? Let's help you do that. So they're looking at a health outcome based on all of the needs of the individual, not just one. And so it's really whatever you want to make it. But the other question I had too is the reason I asked about incentives is, we have a basket that our children are put in after 10 days after their birth. And the only people in our communities who can afford them are those people who have full-time jobs, because these baskets are $2,000 and sometimes more. And so the only people who can buy them are either collectors who just want to put flowers in it or something on the wall, but it's not families with children. And so I really would like to see if anyone has any money. I would like for every child to be placed in a basket after their first 10 days, because that's a part of who we are, right? And but we can't afford them and people can't buy them easily because it's so expensive. And I'm sure Cradle Works are the same.
Thank you to all the panelists for sharing all this great information about Family Spirit. I'm curious, because I know it started with nutrition and then expanded to so much more. How much, if at all, does physical activity and movement come into play, either in the curriculum or kind of from the participant side, as something people are seeking guidance or support for?
From the early development standpoint. So we are interested in, and for languages medicine team, and just to put a are in the piloting stage of this supplement to Family Spirit, and I just submitted my first RO1 with COMI. And so I'm looking at community partners, including an Intertribal Council of Michigan just agreed to be part of it. So if any community wants to take this and be interested in the next step, which is a randomized controlled trial, look at the effectiveness of language as medicine on overall development of young Native children, including gross motor, fine motor development. In our pre-intervention assessments and our post-intervention assessments, we are looking across neural development. So we're collecting measures of fine motor and gross motor development in our intervention as well. And what we're seeing is that our language intervention, so trying to improve and increase language nutrition, increasing parent responsiveness, just helping parents to better understand all these different domains of development, to understand screening versus assessment, the effects of hearing loss, chronic otitis media on language development, that all has been impactful and helpful for addressing areas of motor development, increasing and helping young children. So these are children that haven't even walked yet, to reach those motor milestones as well. So I can comment on that part. And so what preliminary data is showing that language as medicine can be effective in increasing overall development, including motor development in young Native children.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that new Lego funded project, the revelation in that work is to pair with the home visiting work, funding for the communities to build outdoor play spaces that promote traditional forms of play and cultural practices. So all the communities that are coming into that program will have those funds, and we really want to understand how much that might elevate the impacts at the family and community social levels. So I think we're out of time. Yes, we're 1 minute over. So we want to give you all a break, and we're going to come back at 2:45, and thank you so much.
We're going to start with the final panel of the afternoon, and Dr. Victoria O'Keefe is going to be one of the co-moderators on the panel, and so I'm going to hand the mic over to Dr. O'Keefe.
Victoria O'Keefe, Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria O'Keefe. I am Cherokee Nation and Seminole Nation. I am an assistant professor at our Johns Hopkins Center for Indigenous Health. And I'm honored to co-moderate this panel with my colleague, Dr. Mary Swift, and Maria Walker, who is a 2022 Center for Native American Youth Champion for Change. So the previous panel and this panel are both focused on cultural strengths. And we've heard a lot today about how Indigenous communities have always held land-based knowledges, values, and traditions that have promoted health, well-being, and life, not only for humans, but for all living beings and all of our relatives. When we talk about these cultural strengths, we're not talking about the past. We're talking about how these strengths and traditions continue today and will be shared for generations to come. I want to share a quote from the book, Cherokee Earth Dwellers, which was written by Cherokee scholar Christopher Tootin and the late elder, cultural keeper, and former Cherokee Nation Chief Hastings Shade. They wrote, Cherokee tradition is living cultural knowledge that continues to be shared intergenerationally. It grows and changes within Cherokee community and is in turn defined by community. For me personally, this is how I understand cultural strengths through this lens, that our traditions are based in living knowledges. They're not static. And they continue to change based on how our community defines them and how they're transmitted across generations. So the presentations that we'll hear about today will share about cultural strengths that represent living cultural knowledges passed down across generations. They will speak about these cultural strengths as the foundation of programs from different Indigenous communities that promote well-being in middle and later childhood. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Swift, my colleague, to introduce our amazing panel of speakers for the session. Odell.
Thank you so much, Dr. O'Keefe. I think I need to bring this in a little bit. I have the honor of introducing this wonderful panel, and I've had the pleasure of working with the majority of them, and I'm going to share some a little bit when I'm doing their introduction, so just so you're ready, they're used to me. But I first also want to say that I am not Indigenous, and I'm really striving to come to this work to be the best ally that I can. So I first have the honor of introducing Dr. Teresa Baraki, who's going to be our first speaker. And Dr. Teresa Baraki is a member of the A'ani Nation of Fort Belknap, Montana. She is an associate professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, and her research really focuses on community-based prevention and intervention to prevent things such as suicide, trauma, and adverse childhood experiences. All right, here's a little, well, I don't think it's embarrassing as praise, so it's just if you get embarrassed by praise. But I know Teresa from working with her to really, I respect her wisdom. She is so wise. I respect how thoughtful and careful she is in the work that she does. And I also just see her as so clear-eyed and focused in her vision. So I'm really excited for you to hear from her. We're switching up the order a little bit today. So our next panelist is going to be, and she's on the end, Dr. Alessandro Angelino, and she is an adolescent medicine clinical fellow at Johns Hopkins at our Center for Indigenous Health. And she is new to our center. We are so excited to have her. She just joined us in 2023. She's had the opportunity, she also, I believe, is coming to this work as an ally, striving to do her best, and she's had opportunities to work with Indigenous populations in Australia. What I'm really excited about is she's working on such an important upcoming area. She's really focused on two-spirit and gender diverse youth, so I'm really excited to hear her presentation today. And I haven't known her that long, but Alessandra really strikes me as a very good listener and is the kind of person, one of our speakers earlier today talked about this, who makes space for people. I really think she does an amazing job at that. So again, we're really lucky to hear from her. And then last but not least are two wonderful women who I might call my sisters. I've known them for many, many years now. The first is Dr. Nolene Goodwish, and she's in the maroon or red here. She's from the White Mountain Apache tribe in Arizona. She's an assistant scientist at our Center for Indigenous Health, and I keep losing track of the number of years she's worked at the center, but I believe it's over 25 now. She'll correct me if I say it wrong. But Nolene is really a leader in her local community, and she really leads a team of wonderful Indigenous staff working across behavioral and mental health projects. And Nolene has a lot of expertise in suicide prevention. When I think of Nolene, I think of her as being one of the hardest working people that I know. She has a great sense of humor, which is so important in doing this work. And she is so persistent. I can't get away with anything. All right. And then last, but definitely not least, I've also had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Francine Larzalier-Sinkwa for a very long time as well. She is also White Mountain Apache from Arizona. She is an assistant scientist at our Center for Indigenous Health. She has also worn many hats over her years at the center, and she joined in 2003. She directs our Native American for Research Center for Health programs, which really supports tribal members to further their education. So it's such an important program that she helps lead. And I know Francine, we'll see what she thinks of her adjectives that I used to describe her: strong-minded, she's determined, and she's very articulate. So we could give our panelists a round of applause. Stretch if you need to. Thank you, Mary. Sorry.
Want it higher?
Yeah, maybe. I think this will work.
Okay. Thank you for your attendance today. This has been a powerful day. My spirit has been filled, and I've enjoyed all of the presentations. So again, thank you for your attendance, but also thanks for the invitation to be here today with you to talk about some of our work, the Young Medicine Movement, visioning the next 100 years. Today I will provide an overview of our work with the Fort Belknap, Ani, and Nakota tribes, focusing on the pathway to nursing, public health, and STEM for Ani and Nakota high school students or the Young Medicine movement. This work has been supported by the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke and the NIH, Native American Research Centers for Health funding mechanism. My purpose on this earth is to work with tribal communities to create culturally safe interventions and to help train the next generation of Indigenous healers and scholars. This is a picture of our graduating DNP students from the School of Nursing in front of our land acknowledgement that Dr. Warren mentioned in our courtyard. Fort Belknap is one of 7 reservations in the state of Montana. And Montana has been at the top among the states with one of the highest rates of suicide for 40 years. Fort Belknap experienced a suicide cluster in 2019, which prompted tribal leaders to declare a state of emergency and establish our research practice partnership with the Johns Hopkins School of Nursing. Suicide is unequally distributed across the 12 IHS geographical areas. However, federal funding is equally distributed across these communities, which means those communities in Alaska receive the same funding as those communities in California. Since the 2019 state of emergency, we have taken a multi-level approach to address suicide at Fort Belknap, including a mixed methods suicide study among 300 Ani and Nakota tribal members, implementing the Young Medicine movement, a public health leadership training for undergrad students, and a mental health certificate program for nurses, community health workers, and other healthcare providers to address the mental health treatment gap in rural and remote communities. I want to talk about the Young Medicine movement. It is a culturally strength-based model for protecting youth. And this is our first cohort. In our Young Medicine movement, or the pathway to nursing, public health, and STEM for Ani and Nakota high school students, is to prepare, educate, and empower Ani and Nakota scholars to become nurses, public health practitioners, and to pursue future careers in STEM disciplines. Our program also prepares scholars to be competitive applicants for the NIH summer internship program at the end of 2 years. This is our first and second cohorts. It's this past summer. So our 7-week curriculum is focused on career development and planning for the future, a week on chemistry, a week on biology and neuroscience, a week on nursing, a work on public health. The 6th week focuses on building resilience, and then the 7th is on planning for success. This year, our scholars attended Indigenous People in Genomics, the SING conference at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. They attended and presented at the Healing Our Spirit Worldwide conference in Vancouver, BC. They also attended and presented at the American Indian Science and Engineering Society in Spokane, Washington, as well as presenting at the NCRE conference in Denver, Colorado. So not only are they getting experience in all of these courses, they're also having opportunities to build their network, improve their public speaking. Next slide, please. So through the process of creating a logo, to represent the program, scholars also renamed our pathway to nursing, public health, and STEM program to Young Medicine Movement. The YMM logo takes inspiration from traditional understandings of how the earth and spirit world are mirrors of each other. What we do on earth reflects what our ancestors are doing in the spirit world. The people shown are going up to become healers in their communities through traditional medicines and education. This speaks to our mission as a program to integrate community health and cultural understanding into the ways in which our scholars will become healers in Fort Belknap. Through this process, they became the healers and the medicine of the community. The futurity activity originates in work by Laura Harjo in her book Spiral to the Stars, which takes on an Indigenous perspective of how our communities' futures are built by our small daily actions. It asks us to examine our present actions by how they will affect the future of Indigenous relatives. We look to our ancestors' desire for our world to inspire us to continue to build toward a decolonial future through small and large gestures for the generations to come after us. In our activity for YMM, we ask our scholars to think about how implementing aggressive climate change policies today could create a livable world in the future compared to if no efforts are made to protect our earth. Then we ask our scholars to think about what future our ancestors had envisioned for us throughout early colonization. We perform an activity to understand our leaders' decision to sign treaties. Then we ask our scholars to envision what kind of world we want for the coming generations. Lastly, we brainstorm what tangible things we could be doing right now to make those worlds possible. And I'm just gonna and I just want to say, so this is a really powerful approach to helping identify themselves as the medicine for the future, the change makers, and the cycle breakers. They're building confidence, self-esteem, and gaining knowledge about STEM, nursing, public health, research, and tribal history. Their engagement in enhancing their own physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, and community health. And they're learning how to break out of their comfort zones, speak, present, travel, explore, and be independent. Okay, so this is the next 100 years. This is how they envisioned it. It didn't happen in a short period of time. This took time to create. So they create an event, and then what's the impact? They think through this, there's steps to take. And I just want to point out a couple of the things that I thought. So the event, carbon neutral reservation, I can't even imagine me dreaming that. Oh my gosh, I have 5 minutes left. I can't even imagine me dreaming that when I was an adolescent or in high school. I will say that the impact is to returning to traditional practices. The people will learn to live in tandem with their environments and using modern technology to achieve a carbon neutrality. Complete cultural revitalization. All tribal people will speak their languages. Sun dances, sweat lodge ceremonies will be open and common. Kinship and social roles are restored. So these are things that the youth came up with. So we give them the space, we ask the questions, and they create. And so again, this is something that's I'm not going to be here in 100 years, but I hope they achieve some of this. And we're willing to support them to do that. Next slide, please. And the cultural activities, we worked on not only the more traditional content, the chemistry, the biology, but everything else, it's embedded in culture. So in the morning, we present the scientific information activity, cultural activities are in the afternoon. Oh, okay, next one. And I just want to point out these are the strength and wisdom of the youth. They tremendous emotional intelligence. Their growth and maturity is like, they're future oriented. They use humor as coping. They have respect and care for community values. They value elders and culture. They're visionary, creative, and solution focused. And these are actually protective factors that we identify through our mixed method study. So greater tribal identity is protective, communal mastery is protective, benevolent childhood experiences are protective, emotional intelligence is protective, positive family relationships are protective. These are all things that we know in our communities. But through research, we're able to identify what those are. Just some artwork, and they had stories to tell about tribal strengths. And in conclusion, supporting youth to be strong, impactful, healthy, and successful with their goals, dream, visions for the future, working collectively to promote youth, because they're going to be our leaders. We have to put all we can, not only into our children, our adolescents, our youth, because they're going to soon drive this. I have a video. Do we have time for the video? Yeah, we have time.
I learned that helping people was something that I want to do. Before I never really thought about that. I guess I was kind of thinking more so how to help myself. This program really helped me out on that I wanted to help people out.
The Young Medicine movement has impacted my academic career because I've actually been interested in nursing before this, but it really made me want to go into it now that all the weeks that I got to experience here. Culturally, it has impacted me by, I got to learn more about language with all the panelists that came in and taught us about language. And I got to learn more about life before the reservation and what it was like before that. I'm just thankful for this opportunity that I got to be in this program.
The Young Medicine movement has given me a lot of academic and cultural experience. It has given me a chance to learn about the job I want, which is to become a nurse. Also, it has given me a great chance to speak to our elders and to learn more.
The stuff I learned here, I didn't learn at school yet, like helping that mannequin give birth. We worked a lot on pregnant people. I also got CPR certified.
When I came here, I didn't really know what I wanted to go to college for. It's really helped me find my passion for nursing, and this has really supported me in going to that direction.
Welcome to our ceremony for the Young Medicine movement, or the Pathway to Nursing, Public Health, and STEM for Ani and Nakota High School students. We're invested in helping support your children to achieve higher education in the medical and research-related higher education and beyond. We're in partnership with you, and so again, I thank you for.
I really am excited to pursue my career in nursing after high school, but I also do want to come back to my community and help out the reservation to improve it better. I think that'll be like a good fit for me.
wanted to go Miriam for a little bit. Good afternoon, everyone. As Mary introduced me earlier, I'm Novaline Goldfish. And we'll be talking about our elders resiliency curriculum. And we named it in Apache with our elders, meaning that, you know, we want our teachings, the traditional teachings, knowledge, and culture to continue, and that's what our elders curriculum is all about. And so, our Elders Council was established in 2007 because of our work on suicide prevention. And as a staff, we struggled a lot, you know, talking about suicide, going out in the community, meeting with our community members who had thoughts of suicide, who made an actual attempt on suicide, and being able to talk with them about how important their life was really hard. When you're raised to not talk about suicide, and now you're supposed to go and have a conversation with someone who tried to either kill themselves or they had really strong thoughts about not wanting to live anymore. And as we continued to do the work, it didn't get lighter, it got heavier because we didn't feel like we had the right to be talking about it. And so as we developed our connection with our elders and then asked if they wanted to be a part of our elders council, as we continued to meet with them, some of our elders said it was important for them to give us permission to talk about suicide in the community because it was taboo. And for them to do that was really important. It doesn't mean that it made it easier, it just allowed us to move forward and figure out our path on suicide prevention within our community, and that's where our Elders Council started, and then we moved towards the Elders Resiliency Curriculum. It took us several years to develop that curriculum, specifically with our elders. If any of you work with elders, they have their own agenda. As you all know, you can create whatever agenda you want. You can say, okay, at the beginning, we're going to do our welcome opening prayer, and then we're going to do introductions. We did that with 50 elders, 5 hours, introductions. We didn't move past introductions. The next meeting, the elders said, we all know each other. We're not introducing anybody anymore. Just continue on with the meetings. So they allowed us to work with them, and they also shared how important it was for them to reconnect with the youth. They wanted to get into the schools. We want you to go and talk to the principals. We want you to go and talk to the teachers. Tell them we want to go into the classroom. They make it sound so simple and easy. We go to the schools and then we hit barriers. We were able to overcome those barriers, and our elders started going into the schools. And then our elders said, okay, we're not teaching consistently. She's teaching something different in her classroom. I'm doing something different. We all need to be on the same page. You need to develop a curriculum for us. So we did that, which required hours and hours of recording, transcribing, and also videotaping our elders in order for us to capture the important things that they wanted to share with our youth. Once we got that developed, we started working with the elders. Our elders curriculum is not a solid document. It's not permanent, it's not finalized. It's a process, it's fluid, it's always changing. Just like we had a meeting on, when was it? Last week, on Wednesday, and we're going through the curriculum for November. And they said, okay, that curriculum is not correct. You need to make some changes. I don't know who made that statement, but you need to change some of the words. Okay, so I'm sitting there writing, and I don't know how to write in Apache. I can't write it. If I do write it, I don't know what the word is once I try to translate it. So that's not something that I need to be doing. But it's important for everybody to know that with the elders, there's so much knowledge, there's a wealth of knowledge, and we're trying to put it into, you know, a teaching of 45 minutes. It doesn't work that way. So it takes a lot of time to be able to do that. And so we just want to give you just a little example of some of the things that we've been doing with our elders in our community, focusing on the youth, and then also the, you know, curriculum and the teachings that have been happening over the years. And so this is one of our lessons that we've had off to your right-hand side on the screen. So, you know, it talks about the background. So it's culturally grounded. Their, you know, interventions are built with tribal worldviews, values, and practices.
our elders do have a lot of say in what the curriculum is going to look like, whether it's correct or not, if something needs to be changed, and we do it, as soon as they bring it to our attention. The elders curriculum is culturally grounded because our elders are the ones that put a lot of time and effort into this, making sure that they're teaching something that's meaningful. The reason why we started doing this was to focus on suicide prevention outside the law. Not talking about suicide directly because our elders are not as comfortable talking about it, even saying the word. And also in Apache, there isn't a word for suicide. It's descriptive. You're describing suicide. And so it's important for us to be able to share that with our youth and letting them know how important their life is, to value, who they are, to know who they are as a person, and also as, a white mountain Apache, what does that mean to you? And so being able to have our elders go and teach that in the classroom is really important. And so the development of our curriculum and also meeting with our elders on a regular basis, it helps us to continue to move forward and also provide the support and guidance for our students within the schools that we are now, going back into, since COVID. And so our elders go in and teach youth. We did start with one of the schools on the reservation, Canyon Day Junior High, focusing on 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And then some of the other schools reached out saying that they wanted to have our elders come in and learn the lessons. And so when we went to a couple other schools, we went all the way down to 3rd grade. And so the elders will adjust how they're teaching the curriculum based on the different grades. And some elders are more comfortable with the younger ages versus the older ages. And so they'll identify where they're the most, comfortable, and they'll go in and teach the language. So the curriculum is taught both in English and in Apache. And so the elders will, they'll teach the lesson in Apache, and then we translate it into English for the students that don't understand our language. And then as we're going through, we have a lesson for each month. That took quite a bit of time. If we were to create more lessons, that would require a lot more time. We do have all of the recordings where we would be able to go back and probably expand upon some of the lessons and make them a little bit longer if needed. And the goals of the program are to promote the strengths of the Apache culture, foster family and community connections, promote youth and identity. And when we work with our youth, we wanted to find out from them what they really wanted to take out, what was important for them when the elders come in and teach. And this is some of the things that they had shared with us as well. So that was important for us to be able to do that. And so this gives you an idea of what's taught each month in the classroom. And we're fortunate that the schools allow us in their classrooms for 1 hour for the elders to be able to teach this. And as we're going through, there's also homework for the students at the end. There's also some of our Apache language in there. It's written in Apache, and then we translate it into English for them. We go over that with them as well. And then at the end, there's monthly responsibilities that the elders go over. So for each month, what did they do growing up as when the elders were younger? They also share those teachings with the youth. There's a portion in the curriculum where it allows the elders to be able to do story time. And so they'll also share, different ways that they grew up or different lessons they learned over the years. They also talk about resiliency in their, some of the cultural teachings. And then in some of the classrooms, before the elders ever teach, they'll tell the students to stand because we're going to do a prayer before they present them with the lesson. And in the public schools in Arizona, they're not allowed to do the prayers in there, but we're not going to tell the elders they can't. So the elders can do pretty much what they want when they're in the classroom, and the teachers are usually off to the side and they're okay with it. But we do get feedback from the teachers, as the elders continue to go into the classrooms. After the elders leave, the students do show more respect towards one another, and they are more respectful to their teachers and to the school administration. And so that's really important because that's the whole point of bringing our elders in, is to make sure that the students are respecting themselves and respecting others so that it is a positive learning environment for them. So I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Francine. So.
Good afternoon, Francine Marsler, St. Clark, and from the White Mountain Apache tribe. And so, as normally shared, that our elders were in the schools, but COVID just did a number on everybody, and including our elders, and their ability to go and, reconnect with our youth, because that was one of the key reasons why the curriculum was developed, is that our elders identified that our youth are not able to come to them. And the youth identified that they don't know anything about the elders. And so doing that reconnection for the youth and the elders was important. And so our elders will be back in the schools on Thursday when we get back to our office for the first time since COVID, affected all of us. And so the current funding that we have is through NIH, and Dr. Victoria O'Keefe is the PI for this. And so we're really looking at evaluating the effectiveness of this curriculum and also being able to share it with other Native communities. So very quick, in conclusion, we know as Native people what is going to work in our communities. But in order to prove that, you have to also do research and prove the efficacy of that. Our elders have taught us through the meetings we've had with them, through the teachings they've given to us, how we are supposed to move forward and address the things that come up into our lives. We do have, a lot of health disparities and inequalities that we face as Native people. But it's not just Native people who face those same things. It's all cultures, all nations throughout the world. And so, we really want to be able to share what we've learned with our elders with the suicide prevention that we've been working on, because we are resilient. And so, it is upon us as almost elders, not quite, to move this work forward and to be there for our youth, to guide them, protect them, for their children to move forward as well. And so a lot of funding has gone into all of the suicide prevention efforts that we have done over the years. Almost 20 years to be exact, that we've been working on suicide prevention and interventions. And so, our elders hold that path for us to move forward. The youth, who play a very key role in who we are and how we move forward. To our staff, Nobody's leadership, the dedication that is there every day, long hours. Nobody teaches you about suicide prevention. Our community members taught us, and our elders have guided us. To our photographer who came out and worked with us, and to all the funding agencies that have provided the support we needed to move forward and to share our work with all of you. And before I close, I would like everybody to stand up. And place your left hand to the person to your left. Your other left. So yes, we are here today for, the recognition and the experiences that Native people, Indigenous people have experienced. But all people around the world have experienced something in their own manner, whatever culture they might be. And as our elders have taught us, you also forgive. And you also share the wisdoms that you were taught in a respectful manner. Because if you looked at that list that the elders created, the very first topic is respect for yourself, for others, for Mother Earth, and for everything that the Creator has given to us. And so I want to say thank you, and the Creator's blessings on all of you as you go about your daily lives, the work that you do, and the lives that you will touch. Thank you.
My name is Alessandra, and it's really an honor to be here and to listen and learn from you all. And before I get started, I just wanted to acknowledge that a lot of what I'll be talking about would not be possible without the courage of youth, adolescents, and elders who shared their stories with myself and the research teams that I was a part of. And I think that's always important, but especially with some of the more current work that I'll be talking about and the legislation surrounding gender-affirming care, just to think about how folks are really being courageous because their lives, quite frankly, depend on it. And so just asking us to think about what our role is in protecting those folks and doing what we can to not only support them, but to celebrate them. And so in that vein of thought, today I'll be talking to you about celebrating our magic, which is a quote from one of the youth that I worked most closely with, and talking about ways that we can promote both research and advocacy for two-spirit and gender diverse adolescents. So today I'll start off by just talking about what two-spirit means and give some history behind concepts of gender and identity for Indigenous folks in the United States. And then I'll get into a little bit about some research work. You'll see the first study will be more needs and barrier focused, but the second study I'll talk about will really highlight a lot of strengths and pride and community connection. And then I'll share some resources at the end that you all can reference. And so on that first objective, I wanted to begin again by defining two-spirit. So two-spirit is a new term that was coined in 1990, utilized by many folks both in the United States and Canada to describe gender, sexual, or spiritual identity. This definition and this concept moves beyond Western concepts of the binary gender and really focuses on role and community. And so you'll see below there are photos of individuals throughout history who have been gender diverse. They might not have used the term two-spirit, but in their own languages and communities, they held revered roles as leaders, as chiefs, as medicine people. And I think this is really important for us to just ground all discussions about gender diversity, but especially in Indigenous communities. And I think in a lot of the discourse today, we're hearing folks who are non-believers, let's put it nicely, feeling like gender diversity is a trend. And we see examples here and throughout history that this is really not a trend at all. And so we can just look at the last slide of this. We've talked about this a bit, but I think the point I wanted to highlight depicted in red is, again, folks who were gender diverse were celebrated over time. And through boarding schools and all of the trauma that has occurred, folks who were gender diverse had to hide their identity. So that was just another facet of identity that folks were not able to really demonstrate and celebrate. And that was one factor that led to a lot of health disparity and inequity. And so the first study that was mostly done in the Pacific Northwest looked at what needs were for two-spirit youth and adolescents. And so a lot of the youth that we studied demonstrated, worse outcomes related to mental and physical health that were on par with what we see in youth and adolescents who are not Indigenous. But there were a lot of needs that highlighted lack of cultural understanding in general about indigeneity, but really about two-spirit and concepts related to historical context. And so beyond this first study, in addition to assessing those needs and barriers that I'll show on the next slide, we really wanted to understand what folks were already doing in terms of community programming, and their ability to connect with history and culture when able, and ways that families were supporting each other. And so on the next slide, this was what we came up with from that study. Again, just those barriers, both delivering care to Two-Spirit and gender diverse youth, and then barriers receiving care on the patient side, all within this context of historical traumas. And I think without getting too much into that, the deficits, really what we found among all the youth and adolescents that we worked with and elders was, again, that call to really focus on strengths and resilience. And so that led us to the next study, but I do want to read this quote first because I think it's really powerful. And this was from one of the behavioral health providers. "I don't think we would be where we are today and need the services that we need for people in these communities if it weren't for colonization. It has everything to do with colonization. And I sometimes sit and wonder, what if history had been different? Where people have come here and instead of bringing disease and manipulation and murder and rape and stealing people's cultures and all of that, if they came here in peace, what would today look like?" And so I think, there are a lot of powerful quotes from that, but the big thing that we really wanted to focus on, taking some of the quotes and some of the other experience from youth together, was how can we now take these stressors, these disparities, and focus on that culture and using that as a buffer. And so we used the Indigenous stress coping model from Walters and Simone to really make us think about, okay, we know there's this connection, and now how can we pull out those cultural strengths for Indigenous, Two-Spirit, and LGBTQ youth and adolescents. And so the next study, what I was really lucky to and grateful to be a part of with the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board, and this specifically focused on pride and community connection. It was a national study that enrolled 15 to 65-year-olds. And because of my pediatric background and adolescent medicine focus, I'll just be talking about the adolescent results. But if folks are interested, there are data published that you can look more into. But what I wanted to highlight specifically on the next few slides are just how strong the pride and connection is in this community. And so this first slide looks at gender identity. And if we look across the first two bars, the light blue is cisgender individuals. So folks who identify as female and present as female. Gender diverse is in navy blue, and then the all column is in orange. And so I think the key point from this is that folks are really proud to be Two-Spirit and feel that being Two-Spirit helps them do good things for their community. And then the next two bars show that they feel strong support from their community, which I think is something that, if you look at non-Indigenous folks and how they feel about the general community, that sentiment is not there. So that was really a big takeaway for us. And then looking at Indigenous identity in particular, I won't read all of these in detail, but again, there's just strong pride in being Indigenous and feeling like Indigenous identity helps folks do good things for their community. And then lastly, this is really a powerful takeaway for us. These questions asked about folks and their participation in Indigenous traditional practices. And the bars that are starred are folks who are gender diverse, so most often folks who are Two-Spirit. And they had the strongest response to these questions. So thinking back to that first slide I showed you when I mentioned that Two-Spirit folks held roles as medicine people and leaders. Again, we're seeing today in this is 2022, but 2022 that the gender diverse folks were the ones that are most strongly connected to the land. They're following traditional values and doing those things. So that was really powerful for us. And also cool, this is the 15 to 25-year-olds, right? So something for us to be thinking about and inspired by. These are some quotes from these youth. The first one, again, kind of highlighting that impact of colonization, but the next two focus on that connection to the community. So people like me have always been around. We've always been a part of the community. Our stories have been erased. the ceremony piece has been huge for my healing and wellness. And then that last quote, it meaning the term two spirit resonates on a deeper level because it connects my relationship to the land, my relationship to my ancestors, and my relationship to elders and the youth. So I think that was my favorite and poignant in today's context. I want to leave everyone with an opportunity to learn more and to access resources. So if you scan the QR code, it'll take you to a PDF with some information about the Paths Remembered project, which is out of the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board. There are a ton of blogs, print materials that you can order for free. There's access to free mental health care in both states now. That is gender affirming by Native providers, which we all know is rare. So definitely access the QR code. And then I just wanted to highlight the Celebrating Our Magic Toolkit briefly. This is something that I just facilitated, but it's created by really wonderful youth and their relatives with the support, of course, of the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board. And essentially the toolkit is broken up into sections to, you know, we imagined it that a youth would be in a really rural community or a community where they had absolutely no one to turn to, and they were questioning their identity, wanting to learn more, and that they can just pick up that book and find the support and resources that they need. So this is accessible on that link from before, and you can also order it for free through the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board. But I'll briefly just show some photos. So in the first slide, there's just like background and information about definitions, how to use pronouns, etc. This is the youth section, so it really just highlights youth stories in here, and then gives advice about how youth can kind of advocate for themselves, but then if they're in a space where it's safe and they can, how to advocate for others. And then there's information for families and relatives, really focused on how they can not only support their own mental health, but how they could support their child and find support and care. And then there's a section for healthcare providers. Again, some of this is written for non-Indigenous providers who might not be familiar with some of the ways of knowing that folks spoke about earlier, just again, the historical context, and then it gives some more information with guidelines. And so these are just examples of that with some more pictures and the wonderful beadwork diagrams. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with Dr. Shaquita Bell, but she's one of my mentors, and she did some beading, and her husband is a graphic designer, and so he did those for us virtually. And so I just want to thank, of course, the folks that I've been lucky enough to learn from and partner with on these studies, and really grateful to now be at the Center for Indigenous Health, as well as my adolescent medicine fellowship team at the School of Medicine. And then some of the funding for these projects came from the Indian Health Service and the Minority HIV AIDS Fund. So I thank you, and if anyone wants to do QR code again and wants the resources, I'm happy to reach out.
So just want to thank our panel. We will have time for one or two questions. So I'm just gonna, hopefully you guys can hear me in the back, so I don't have to keep readjusting the mic. But I'm gonna do the honors because I'm a moderator of asking the first question, but then if others have some percolating. We're so lucky to have Maria here with us today. Really bringing the youth perspective. And so my first question, and Maria knows this is coming, is actually to Maria. And I would just love to hear, from her experiences and from her, from her youth perspective, what she really sees as a strengths-based approach. So thank you, Maria.
Hi guys, again, my name is Maria Walker. I am a CNAY champion for change. And
I am from the White Mountain Apache Reservation. I actually was able to work with John Hopkins in their infectious disease team for about a summer, which was really amazing. And that sparked my interest into clinical research. So now I'm going into Arizona State University for clinical research with my background. But with culture and my identification, culturally, it really helps me to be who I am. It really helps me my morals and my beliefs on everyday practices. It really reminds me that I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams, that I'm living for them every day, and that I walk every day when they would want me, how they would want me to walk, how my culture is my backbone, and how I will look back and reflect on stuff in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Other questions from the audience? Don't be shy. There we go. Thank you.
A couple of you guys talked about protective factors for you, and I imagine against or across different communities, a lot of those are similar, if not the same. And I just wonder if there would be any value, or do the youth of different communities ever get together to sort of talk about their different experiences in terms of what is protected, because it seems that there's a lot of diversity in the culture between the tribes, it feels like. And I just wonder if you could be supporting you a little bit as another protective factor.
I was gonna say, which of our panelists wants to try to tackle that one? It's a great question.
So I can talk about the youth at Fort Peck. We've already done some, identified protective factors. And then Fort Belknap. So the two common protective factors in both communities is tribal identity. In Fort Peck is protected for high-risk substance use, and in Fort Belknap is protected for suicide, both ideation and attempts. Communal mastery, which is group advocacy, is protective for high-risk substance use in Fort Peck, and for suicide in Fort Belknap. So what we've done at Fort Peck is develop 4 cultural lessons based on the findings from the suicide study there, and that is 2 of those 4 cultural lessons that I had mentioned previously. We're currently adapting those for Fort Belknap to be included in our young medicine movement, but they are currently used in an intergenerational intervention for parents and their 3 to 5-year-old children. We're in stages of randomized control trial at Fort Peck, but we're adapting those lessons for Fort Belknap. In that sense, we're using data from one community and curriculum developed in one community for the other. The only time that youth in that area come together are around Indigenous games, which they rotate across reservations, and then 2 powwows, which in and of itself is a strength. So we don't have particular activities like we used to in the past that bring all kids together, like they're all youth together. But I think it's a great opportunity to build those bridges and peer-to-peer support.
Other questions from the audience? Any other questions?
life experience working with Indian education in Denver a while ago. Some years ago, and I brought these Hopi kids, well, they're like the Indian kids, and they were to the natural history. And I wanted to show one of the kids this initiation rites doll. It's a Kashina. And so she's 10 years old. And I told her that word, so we just get there on the and we're going to go and you come over there. And so she can't see that until she gets to that space. So I like what you said about the elders going in there and doing like internal complexity. How do we do that? Even internally foster ourselves so we know how to treat our own information that we can deliver at the right time. Okay, that's one thing. And so one of the difference between people out here with Newtown and Halftown and the agency Indians, the ones that have their homes, the BIA Indians that have a lawn and parents. So we talk about this thing like little sweeping, but on the reservation, it's not like that. Some of our people have 2 houses. I grew up in Lorette. We have a ranch out there. By 3 kids from Fort Collins, and then they have another house at the agency. They kind of well off, they got 2 houses. Some people don't have no house. So when we're talking about these nuances in suicide prevention, I think it would be nice if we were honest about the complexities and the intricacies inside the community. Because we're not only talking, I heard some black people talk about black on black crime. So the question I'm asking has to do with Indian on Indian responsibilities to each other, even when we have the opportunity to do that. How do we do it? When we know the large board has Indians, probably mostly of a certain tribe. Because on our tribe, I think it would be interesting to talk about on our council. Traditionally, we had Grovans and Cinnamon with 2 distinct languages and cultures. In order to pick for a leader, you can only be Grovan and pick for a Grovan leader. You can only be Cinnamon and pick for Cinnamon leader. And we just recently got past that. But it was like growing up with Republicans and Democrats. Leader, Grovan could be trying to take down the German or the Cinnamon. Maybe you have to get answering those questions. And
there. Thank you, sir.
Hey, Robert, where do I start? I'm one of those ranch people. I grew up on a ranch, on the southern end of the reservation. I think I'll just start talking. For us, each of our projects has its own tribal advisory board. We also get tribal approval. We have a tribal resolution that approves each of our projects. So it goes through that process. We have a tribal advisory board who guides and directs development of our work and who helps make sure or ensure that it's aligned with the community. And because we work in both reservations that we work with, there are 2 separate tribes. We really have to be careful about how we select participants, how we select our tribal advisory board. We have to select from both tribes. Otherwise, we're going to have Ani trying to take down a Assiniboine or Nakota or whatever. But we are really careful. We're really make sure that we're making decisions cautiously because there are 2 separate tribes. And we also go into all of the communities. We don't just stay in one community and work in one community. We have our tribal advisory board guide us on data collection numbers. And we usually collect more data from the higher risk communities because they all know which community it is. We don't do anything without tribal approval, without their guidance, and the dynamics between tribes, I think has to do a lot with poverty. We're particularly those communities that were established during the preservation era are areas of concentrated poverty. And where we find concentrated poverty, we also find high rates of violence, poor performing schools, early death, increased morbidity and mortality, and their meaning to one another. And so, and that contributes to suicide risk. Until we get to and resolve some of those issues, we're part of the problem. And so thank you for your question. I'm gonna stop talking there because I'll keep going, but thank you very much.
Might have time for one final question. If there's a final thought from the room. There's no pressure to make it the best question. Well, maybe this is kind of our natural way of saying that we've come to a wonderful end for this presentation, this panel. I thank them for their innovative work that they've shared and keeping us engaged at the end of the day. And thank you guys for your great questions. If you're staying around, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer more questions one-on-one. So we can give them another round of applause.
Thank you so much. Wonderful panel. Both panels this afternoon were just tremendous, and it's very encouraging to see the great work that's going on to address maternal, child, and family health. And I love that it's family spirit, and that's been one of my pet peeves working in medicine and public health. You know, when we say maternal and child health, who are we leaving out? You know, the role of families and fathers are very important in the health of our communities and in the future. So I love family spirit and all the great work that's being done and every other project that we've been able to describe. But we can show the Planetary Health video now. I think it'd be good just to close with that, and I'll share a few closing thoughts after that. But let's go ahead and play the Planetary Health video.
I want to tell you a story. Once there was a breathtakingly beautiful planet with swirling patterns of blue and green and white moving through vast, dark space, a perfect distance from its warming sun to develop an explosion of millions of forms of wild, improbable, interconnected, and unimaginably beautiful life. Late in the pulse of declining and emerging species, a newcomer arrived, neither particularly fast nor fierce, but with an unusually large and complex brain, and began to separate itself from the others. Like all life forms, early humans began to mobilize resources to support their needs. Our ingenuity in doing this exceeded any species the planet had ever known. Mastering tools, harnessing fire, developing agriculture, and domesticating animals, we began to appropriate the rest of nature to meet our needs. Somewhere along the way, we began to tell ourselves a story of human exceptionalism, that we are separate from nature and that the rest of the natural world is ours for the taking. Individuals and entire cultures with stories and ways of life that emphasized living in harmony with nature and protecting the web of life tended to be marginalized or destroyed. Late in the story, we discovered the nearly boundless energy stored in the fossil remains of previous life forms. burning these fuels exponentially increased our ability to transform landscapes, develop new products and technologies, mine minerals from deep in the ground and sea, fell forests, expand agriculture and food production, transport people and products, and extend fishing to the remotest reaches of the ocean. In the space of less than a century, we became the dominant force shaping Earth's biophysical conditions. Our inventions and discoveries allowed most of humanity to experience breathtaking improvements in education, wealth, and health. Global adult literacy doubled from 1940 to 2015. The percentage of people living in extreme poverty fell from 62% to 10%, despite a nearly threefold increase in the global human population during that time. Average global life expectancy rose from 46 years to 72 years. But the same extraordinary technological and scientific developments that fueled these unimaginable improvements in human development over the course of a single lifetime also accelerated the erosion of our planet's natural systems. In removing ourselves from nature, we've allowed our collective activities to become extreme. To feed ourselves each year, we claim 40% of the world's land surface for croplands and pastures. We appropriate half the accessible fresh water, mostly to irrigate our crops. We've dammed over 60% of the world's rivers and cut down half the temperate and tropical forests. The pollution from our enterprises contaminates air, water, and soil at a global scale and is driving accelerating climate change. Of the total mass of mammals on Earth today, 36% is human beings, 60% is domesticated livestock, 4% is wild mammals. 2/3 of the birds, reptiles, amphibians, fishes, and mammals that used to share the planet with us are gone. 1 million species face extinction, many within decades. In pursuit of our ambitions, all of nature has become collateral damage. But human beings are not disconnected from the rest of the natural world. Planetary health is a rapidly growing transdisciplinary field focused on understanding and addressing the human health impacts of our degradation of natural systems. Planetary health research is teaching us that our dismantling of nature has become an urgent threat to human health and well-being. A rapidly changing climate, loss of biodiversity, pollution of air, water, and soil, deforestation and other land use changes, and scarcity of fresh water and arable land are interacting to affect the foundations of human well-being. The quality and quantity of food we can produce, the quality of air we breathe and water we drink, our exposure to infectious diseases and extreme weather events, even the habitability of the places many of us live. Every dimension of human health is being affected, from nutrition to infectious disease exposure, from non-communicable diseases to mental health. The enormous health gains we've achieved over the last several decades are now threatened by our own transformation of nature's systems. Nor are the health burdens distributed evenly or fairly. When warming causes malaria to move up into the East African highlands, the poorest families who cannot purchase bed nets are most vulnerable. When pollinating insects decline and crop yields fall, the wealthy can afford to purchase fresh fruit and vegetables while the poor suffer higher rates of heart disease, stroke, and certain cancers because of decreased consumption of these foods. When extreme weather and crop failures drive people from their homes, the wealthy are insulated while the poor suffer. Consumption patterns and value systems of the wealthiest people on Earth are putting the poorest people and future generations in harm's way. Awareness around planetary health is moving quickly across the world. From policymakers to the private sector to the general public, we're waking up to what Martin Luther King once described as the fierce urgency of now. to safeguard human health and well-being, and to protect the rest of life on Earth will require deep, urgent, structural change in how we live and a global commitment to reversing our degradation of Earth's natural systems. Our growing awakening to this fact holds enormous promise. Looking out across the domains of global food systems, energy systems, manufacturing and the circular economy, urban design and green chemistry, we see a rich landscape of solutions. We can imagine a world 100 years from now where the human population has stabilized as a result of educating girls, creating economic opportunities for women, and providing access to contraception for couples who want it. A world in which we have extended today's remarkable gains in renewable energy technology and moved to a post-combustion energy system. A world where we are producing food and manufactured goods with dramatically reduced ecological inputs. And a world where most of us are living in cities that have been designed to optimize physical, mental, and cultural health while allowing nature to regenerate. The moment we face calls for more than rapid innovation in our technologies and practices. Underneath the ecological crisis we have created and the global health crisis that it is precipitating is a spiritual crisis. We've allowed our myth of human exceptionalism to create a rupture between humanity and the natural world we depend on. The reverence and awe that most of us feel toward nature has lost its authority in guiding our decisions. We will need to weave a new fabric with threads from indigenous knowledge, the world's faith traditions, literature, and the arts that reasserts our spiritual connection to the natural world. Our story of human exceptionalism, of extraction, domination, scarcity, and ultimately extinction will need to give way to new stories and values of interdependence, equity, abundance, regeneration, and renaissance. We find ourselves actors in one of history's greatest dramas. A lone species with an outsized talent for bending the natural world toward our will, spinning through space on a stunning but fragile planet. The same complex brain that has subjugated much of nature is bringing us news that the state of natural systems and the well-being of humanity cannot remain disconnected. We know that people around the world are suffering across every region and every dimension of health. We have the science, stories, and solutions in front of us. We know what to do. Will we do it?
You're allowed to applaud the video. Well, I had the honor of sharing just a few final thoughts as we close this important discussion. And I'm reminded of lessons I've learned from elders and cultural leaders and medicine men and medicine women over the years. And it's really remarkable, the quote that was in this video from Martin Luther King, talking about the fear of urgency of now. And the way it was described to me by an uncle many years ago is that the miracle of now, that there's nothing we can do about what's happened in the past, but the future is in front of us. And what we choose to do right now will have an impact on that future for everyone. So the miracle of now is this opportunity that we have to do things in a more positive way. And there's a book called Wisdom Keepers that you may have seen. It's probably 30 years old now, but it was quotes from elders. One of my favorite quotes there, talking about the earth and just the kind of the modern perspective of our sense of superiority over it. And one of the elder women said, "Only a fool would believe that they are superior to that on which they are dependent." Right? Only a fool would believe they are superior to that on which they are dependent. We are dependent on the earth. We're dependent on each other, and we're not superior to any of those entities or beings. So just thinking about that and what we can do as we move forward, and this beautiful panel presentation and all of the other presentations and acknowledging the need for cultural connectedness and how you can see life-saving and wellness-promoting interventions that incorporate traditional culture. And again, another quote, I can't remember exactly how one of my uncles said it, but he was talking about speaking with younger people, and he was asked the question, you know, what are the roles for language, culture, land, and ceremony for healing our people? And he laughed and he said, those are all the same thing, right? Language, culture, land, and ceremony is all the same thing. And we can't separate them out. And when we try to separate them out, we lose that ability to find that deep-rooted interconnectedness among all things. And those things include each of us. We're all an important part of that. So as we move forward, I'm excited about our building and blooming collaborations with the Institute for Planetary Health at Johns Hopkins, formerly Planetary Health Alliance. And I think that we can do a lot of meaningful work. And just like we have wonderful presence of Dr. Redvers as the Indigenous Planetary Health Research Chair for Canada, we can do something like that here. Why don't we have an Indigenous Planetary Health professorship and program and trainings and research? And we can really lead that right here at Johns Hopkins. And we have different areas of focus, including research, and training, and policy, as well as what we are calling wise practices. And we really need to incorporate these principles into training the next generation of public health professionals and policy advocates. And just having this building, this is our first event as a center in this particular facility. And it's here for a reason. And the purpose for having this building right here in Washington, D.C. as part of Johns Hopkins is the goal to expand our work in the policy arena and to have an impact. And the Capitol is just right down the street from here. And I think that we can do the meaningful research, provide really scientifically sound data, and then also advocate for policy changes to improve the health of our planet, but also the health of future generations. And then just finally thinking about the idea of wise practices. We actually stole that idea from Canada, so again, thanks to Nicole for that. But you know, we hear all the time things like best practices or evidence-based practices. And when I hear that, my question is always, whose evidence is it? You know, if something worked effectively in Washington, D.C., does that mean it's going to work effectively in Pine Ridge, South Dakota? Well, it might, but it might not. We need that local context. And we have to be able to look at things that are promising practices or evidence-based, and we have to be able to adapt them for local culture, local language, and local norms. And that really is our charge moving forward. So just so deeply honored to be a part of this with you. For closing, is Lance here by chance? Yep. Is he? Okay, good. Lance, I'll go ahead and call you up. I really appreciate you coming over here. Let's really acknowledge Lance and Giovanna because they're so busy in November. It's Native American Heritage Month. I think every day they're asked to do at least one or two blessings and prayers. And we're just so deeply honored to have both of them here. And again, Lance being from the Northern Cheyenne Nation, from Montana, and Giovanna being from Oglala Lakota Nation. So just so deeply honored and pleased that you can be here to close us in a powerful way. So please join me in welcoming and thanking Lance and Giovanna.
Hello again, my name is Lance Fisher. I just wanted to offer a song. Again, we're always honored to provide this gift that we've been given, and we're always honored to step up and you know, when there's a lot of things going wrong in the world, we just try to do with what we've been taught and share this good medicine with you all. So thank you very much. Yeah, Shaman, I hope, thank you very much.